let's get on to the first series real quick. We are going to start off with Dark. What do you have for us?
I have.
Do you want me to read it, Rhoda?
Yeah, you can read the Japanese.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just gonna say it's Ikenaikyo.
Yeah, Ikenaikyo. Konyaku Haki Sareta Reijouを拾った俺がいけないことを教え込む also known as I'm giving the disgraced noble lady I rescued a crash course in naughtiness. The abbreviation, as Dark just stated, is Ikenaikyo. Sorry, is this a manga original, Dark? Or
I believe it is.
light novel, sorry. It's a light novel.
Oh, okay. This one was. Oh, all right. I was thinking of something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is a comedy, fantasy, and like light-ish like romance series.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll just read the mall synopsis first. But it's Alan
Yeah.
is a misanthropic wizard who lives deep within the forest. He is known as the Demon Lord and feared by those around him. One day, while living his life as a hermit, he comes across a young, which is not really like a hermit. I mean, but either way, he comes across a young girl named Charlotte who collapsed in the forest. Despite being innocent, she was accused of evil deeds, had her engagement annulled, and was forced to flee her country. When he heard that, Alan remembered the agony of being betrayed by a group he once thought was his companions. After hearing the story of the 17-year-old's exploitation, Alan decides, I'll let her live in my mansion and I'll teach her all sorts of bad things. So yeah,
Now it's up
the
to your
main
imagination to
character,
wonder what the bad things are.
yeah, so the main character Alan basically was part of an adventuring party allegedly, and they wound up betraying him and like leaving him for dead. And he just kind of became like a amazing sorcerer after that, but doesn't like living around people. So like kids and stuff think that he's like the demon lord. Um, because he's a really powerful sorcerer. Um, who
Right.
like lives by himself. And then like yells at people as they come by, or just has like a scary face and demeanor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so Charlotte has the sort of like stereotypical thing happen in these sorts of series where like her noble prince like fiance wanted like obviously like, must have wanted to break off their engagement or something, and in order to do that he just like falsely accused her of a bunch of shit and then like imprisoned her. And
Right.
then she escaped and wound up with like in the forest by Alan. Um, so the basic premise winds up being him realizing that she was living life in a sort of like Cinderella type circumstances, you know, where she was essentially a servant, even though she was supposed to be nobility, and mistreated by everyone around her. Um, you know, she was given to do all the chores. And so Alan then takes it upon himself to essentially just spoil her. The
Mm-hmm.
first episode was basically, or just try and, well, do a couple things. So the first episode was basically spoiling her and being like, you know, just buying the most expensive like sweets that he could, and saying,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like that was dinner, and she is adamantly against it, being, you know, the shtick of, well, that's not really a balanced meal. Like, you know, you can't just eat cake for dinner. And so there's certain like cute scenes like that. And then the second episode was him like trying to get her to, in a roundabout way that I won't spoil, like realize that while she's there, she is like free to speak her mind. She's free to like voice when she's angry. Um,
Actually, essentially the bad, quote unquote, bad and naughty things
yeah,
in
they're
this
all
series are
like
basically like
very
hedonistic.
lighthearted.
Hedonistic. Yeah,
Yeah,
lighthearted hedonistic.
yeah, it's either hedonistic or like what would you call it? Just like general
Chill out kind of.
yeah, and like spoiling her in a way that where it's like, you know, these were things she wouldn't have experienced while being held in such like awful conditions at her old at
Right.
her house, you know.
Mhm. That's the
Um
classic.
yeah, and it's essentially revealed in, I want to say, like episode 1 or 2, like very basic plot point. You know, Alan's ultimate goal was to get her to, you know, realize that she would rightfully feel resentment towards, you know, like her fiance or something. And,
Hmm.
you know, like he goes through a scenario in his head, like, oh, well, this was the plan, like, get her to like accept this resentment. Then I infiltrate the castle and find, you know, all the evidence that she has no wrongdoings, and then we expose the prince and he gets arrested or something, and then happily ever after. Like, that was his like head scenario. So he is a
Hmm.
more like, though his look is like so awfully edgy, his intentions are like entirely pure,
Right.
to the point where both of them are oblivious to their sort of romantic situation, or like the like romantic undertones that might come up. And of course, there's like the supporting characters that notice it, while they don't. Um, and yeah, like it kind of is established that at least right now, like they are so oblivious to that they do not see each other as like this situation as romance like whatsoever. Um,
Hmm.
and trying to think of what else beyond that. I guess that's really all there is to say about the story so far. It's pretty cozy. But I think the main highlight of this series is going to be the fact that, you know, Charlotte is voiced by Hayami Saudi, and Alan is voiced by Tomokazu Sugita. So like
Yeah. This
that's
is a
kind of like the
very
highlight. Like
classic.
them
Yeah.
them bouncing off of each other and their voice work like is so complimentary. Where, you know, Hayami Saudi is very like very light, very whispery almost, like very windy in her voice, very like falsetto.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
Sugita is just doing his
Do
very
you
his
think?
like
By the way,
natural
can
voice. Like he is not doing
can I
what you would
ask you?
expect him to do for a character that looks like
Yeah.
this.
Can I? Because can I ask you? Because even when he was young, um, yeah, pretty much, I would say, like, you know how there's obviously, this is very obvious, certain voices, Tom voice are suited to certain characters, right? Like Kugimi Rie is either usually suited to like very kind of kudere kind of stuff if she has to do a more of a adult voice, or it's like the usual tsundere stuff, little animal kind of, right? With Sugita, even when he was young, he did a kind of more adult, like high schooler voice, like the mature guy and glasses guy, nerd kind of, that sort of like stern-ish, oh, kind of voice, right? So this is obviously not helped as he's gotten older, right? He can't really voice, yeah, let's go get him kind of thing, like how
I feel
Kadayuki
like
does, or
so
Too much. You think this
I,
fit?
I
His
think he
voice
could,
fits
like
the
the
character.
thing is, I think he could, because there are moments during this series where some of his talk, like some of his speaking, completely drops the sort of raspiness in his voice, and you could see him
Yeah.
voicing this character without any of that, without any of his like natural, like normal, like raspiness, and
Mhm.
a much lighter tone, and he would sound much more akin to what you would think this character would sound like.
Right.
Um, but instead, you know, he's opting way more for his like throatier, like deeper voice, more what I would assume is like his natural speaking voice, because that sounded like, you know, roughly what he sounds like when he's in interviews or
Does it
things
fit the
like that.
character design, do you think?
It definitely contrasts the character design, but in some ways I feel like it fits I feel like it fits this series more, right? It
Yeah, that's the
in
thing.
the sense of like
It's like the
to
interaction is
neuter.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of neuters to me. It sort of like subdues a little bit of the romance vibes you would normally think are in a series like this, with him
Mhm.
doing such a like or using such a raspier voice and like that contrasting with the character design to that extent
Mhm.
to me is more like the character. I feel like their interactions feel more so of him as a like mentor rather than a love interest of any kind, right?
Mhm.
I'm sure like there will be moments of that, and that could definitely work, but I feel like it kind of like I feel like that juxtaposition really like works with what this series is doing. I mean, I especially think it works with the sort of like how we talked about with the synopsis of it being the naughty things, right? Or whatever. Like he's going to teach her
Yeah.
like, oh, like this is our naughty thing for today. And I was like, what is it? It's eating cake before dinner, right? Like
Yeah. It's like
it
he does such a
it
good job with these sorts of roles. He also did the same thing in Buko SS. It's like uh, it's just I know the visual comes from the original light novel. I just wish it was like there. You know what I mean? It was a little bit more there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really, I kind of don't really hate it anymore after hearing him do this. Um, but I think, yeah, I think design wise, if I had to change anything, like if I had minor changes that I could make to the character, like super minor changes, I would probably make him more either like more taller presenting, slightly bigger, or like harder facial features, like even more intense like eyes or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
um but I do think that the edgy feel, the red eyes, when he has his hood up and stuff in scenes when like there's a scene where kids are that have like kids roaming around the forest doing a what do you call it, like a test of courage or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, I hear
Yeah.
like the demon lord lives here," and he casts like such intense magic on people that they don't even remember like where this is or like when they get here and like how they got
Mm.
back. Um, and the scene essentially like resolves with him like with his hood up at night, just carrying a lantern underlit, looking at them and being like, like, are you guys okay? Like, it's really late right now and you're in a forest.
Right. Right.
And then it
Exactly.
scares them off just because of how he looks. So I think like that, conveying that a little bit more probably would have been better, but I think
Mm.
overall what they were going for I don't really hate.
Mm.
Especially, but
Especially
it
since the
is sold.
interaction with Hayami Sari works. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, like I said, it definitely sells it between Sugita and Hayami Sari. Like the contrast between their voices, the contrast between their characters, and like the
They also
juxtapositions
act this
there
out
are
at
really
times
working.
in like on like podcasts, radio kind of stuff as well, where they're just like uh Sugita is kind of trying to be like the kind of obvious like pervert, like skip it kind of stuff,
Yeah, it's supposed to be
personality.
like
Just
yeah,
like
he's like greaseball.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And Harry Sorry is like, no, get off me, kind of stuff. Like, no, we're not doing that. So like that's an actual. This is like an actual kind of almost comedy duo that's been happening and for the better part of I want to say a decade plus. And obviously is personified almost in this anime. So
Yeah. It's been it's the first two episodes are, I would say, have been very very fun. The
mm,
expanded cast so far is just I mean, even the expanded cast, we have insanely like big hitters, right?
yeah,
We have
yeah,
like the first character introduced was forget how you say her name. I think it is just Mika in the show essentially, but it's or like Miyaka, but she's
Yaha?
yeah, oh yeah, there you go, Miyaha. She's a
Yeah.
she's like a cat girl like delivery service character.
Right,
But
right,
yeah,
right.
that's Ozura Naomi.
Also
So
Naomi?
like yeah, so it's like, and then if you go down this list, like Midorikawa Hikaru, he's not in the show yet, but his character is going to show
Mhm.
up. Like
Yeah.
it's just
Maeda
such
Lin, a lot of stuff. Yeah.
yeah, Lynn. It's just such an insane cast, voice wise, that it's definitely going to be very fun to hear them bounce off of
Hmm.
each other in this. And I
Yeah.
do think that is the highlight. It's this is definitely going to be one of those series where, I mean, granted, it's a light novel, and like, who likes reading anyway? Like, that's stupid. Um, like even more reading than a fucking manga. Like, no, ew,
Mhm.
yucky. Um, but what was I gonna say? This is one of those series where like this is definitely adding a ridiculous amount of content here. By being an anime.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? It's one of
yeah.
those. It's definitely one of those things where we talk about. I mean, it's not obviously to the same level as Bocchi the Rock was. Of
Mhm.
this is what an anime adaptation like is like. What he like the sort of like pinnacle of what you want an anime adaptation to be. But this
Mhm.
is such a strong, um, I think, showcase of
Class.
like. Yeah, and but this is like such a strong showcase of an anime adaptation where it's like the light novel, I'm sure it's fun, right? Like the
Mhm.
premise is fun, it's cute. I'm sure it's enjoyable. But like experiencing this, I'm just like, yeah, is there like really a reason to read it? Like is there a
Yeah.
reason to read the light novel? And like that's how I feel with Boshi the Rock, where it's just like,
Also
is
with
there a
I think
reason for me to
this
read the
series
manga?
too. Yeah. I think with this series too, as you said, obviously, the CEO carrying it, but even like on top of that, or like underneath that as well, the general like composition, the script writing, the direction being run by Asami Takashi as well as Uchida Hiroki, both of who are like they have experience, but they're still a little bit, I want to say, green behind the ears a little bit. So they're more or less, I'm assuming, running it as a pretty straight adaptation of the light novel. With plus or minus maybe like smaller truncations, but usually you don't do truncations that much in this modern era. So it's gonna be pretty much a straight adaptation. So
Yeah.
that being said, the straight adaptation is them being bolstered by these sorts of Seiyu interactions and likely ad libs on the side. So I think it's definitely, as you said, a product that showcased those strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I mean, like, also not to diminish anyone else on this either. Like the audio
Hmm.
visuals are quite nice.
Hmm.
They are. I mean, it's not like, I don't know how to say this. Like the series itself does not lend itself essentially to be um this thing that's going to like blow you away visually because of like what's happening in the series, obviously.
Hmm.
But there are some nice
Hmm.
cuts. There are some really nice animations. I think the colors have been great. I think the sort of the cleanliness of the animation has been really good. Nothing
Hmm.
has really seemed super like muddy, which you can still get in like these sorts of series. Even the most like
Yeah.
tame slice of life series, you can have them cutting corners for certain animations, or like cutting corners for certain background elements or something like that. But everything has been pretty good looking in this. And as far as pacing
Yeah.
goes, obviously, straight adaptation or not, the pacing of the scenes has been very good. It's very snappy, but not like too fast. So that it still feels, it definitely feels very slice of life comedy. Um, and not um I would compare its pacing to something maybe a little bit faster, a little bit more comedy loaded than something like a Dogakobo series, or Saint
Yeah.
Cecilia from a recent season. What was that?
And
It
I
was
think
like
and I think both of the
the
studios also have both in digital network animation and more so in Zero G, which Zero G is a very
oh,
long
I mean,
time
yeah,
studio
and zero,
which
yeah,
it works, but
zero
yeah,
G
they've done a
really popped off. I was gonna mention with, I think, like, Sugamomo was fine for being like an ecchi series.
mhm.
It was still good, like, animation wise, but I think they really popped off with Grand Blue, with their sort of like
Yeah.
comedic
Absolutely.
animation chops with that. So if you have seen anything from the Grand Blue anime, and you
Mhm.
enjoyed that, I think this is definitely something you would probably also enjoy, especially if you liked the visual humor that they were doing there.
Mm. Right.
And yeah, I don't think there's any complaint. Like, opening and ED are very nice, very cozy, very fitting. Um, and yeah, just everything about it. I don't know. It's a very pretty series.
Mm. All right. I guess again, I guess we have to talk about what mouse score would you give it, just to round it off.
Um, well, Mall itself has it at a 7.1. But I would say this would probably be a real 7.5 to an 8. Like,
Okay.
I feel like it's very much like solid enough, especially for
Mm.
what it is. Also, keep in mind, I
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I very much um rate series for the most part in isolation, if that makes
yeah.
sense. I rate them for themselves,
Mhm.
in
I
some
mean,
in
like,
some
compared to
weird
what they
sense,
can
right?
do,
Like,
like, what they should be able to do, right?
yeah, like, it's not, well,
Yeah.
I guess, like, I do and I don't, right? Like, I am tougher
Well
in the
well,
sense
what I'm
of,
saying is that it's like you're not expecting this series to, like, kind of flesh out in the same way as, like, a Beastars would be able to do something. It's not or, like,
yeah, I mean,
it's like
I'm not gonna
Kouseki no
hit
Kuni
this
is that's not how
thing.
that would
Yeah, it's not like this is like surprising me, like, right? Like,
Mhm.
if this had um oh my god, why can't I think of it? Uh, whatever, I'll just say the name in English. If this had like Land of the Lustrous, like, if this was Studio Orange, like, coming out with that and like wowing me like
Mhm.
that visually, I was like, this would be
Yeah.
something I would give a 10. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but it's not doing that. So I'm like, 7.5 to an 8. Like, it's pretty much
Right.
perfect for what it wants to do so far. And
Mhm.
like, it's exceptional with its voice cast. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
but it's not doing anything like,
It's not going above and beyond.
yeah, it's not gonna like shock you. You know what I mean? It's not gonna blow your mind. Like, even something recently, like Bocchi the Rock, like, really kind of blew me away with like what they did with that series.
Right.
But
Right.
it's like, if Bocchi the Rock like didn't feature its visual, like the visuals that it pulled, and the like songs weren't either as good, or like, so, like, if Bocchi the Rock was like, a little bit less, then like that would be something that I would be like, oh yeah, that's like, a fucking 8 or something. But to
Right.
me, like,
Right.
that's like a 10 out of 10, because not only did it meet expectations of being like a solid series, it did a bunch of shit that you would not expect.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, I think overall this is a really solid series. This is definitely good. If you're looking for like something that's like a really soft, like, not really like romance, and like not really like doing even the romance stuff of like rom-com, like misunderstanding stuff, and this is more so of like a romance adjacent series that you'd like comedy of, and you know you're someone who is a normal person and enjoys hearing Sugita and Hayamitari like speak,
Yeah, yeah, that's the crux. That
then
has to be that, like,
this is
comedy
like,
that comedic duo has to be the crux,
yeah,
like,
it's
of your
like
value.
this duo is fucking amazing. So it's like,
Yeah.
definitely check it out if you like any sort of comedy series, realistically. That is based
All
on like a
right.
comedy
Well,
duo with like a romance tinge to it,
yeah,
obviously.
yeah. The back and forth is definitely the crux. But yeah, thank you very much, Dark. Again, if you do like the sound of what Dark mentioned, with again kind of regards to the comic video with a solid audio visual backing, obviously, and pretty decent pacing, I would say please do check it out. It is a light novel original adapted by co-production between Digital Animation Lab or whatever it's called. What it's
Yeah, I don't
called? Yeah,
really know what
Digital Network
digital
Animation
network
is
animation is. It must be like
yeah.
a growing studio or like a sub studio of something
Yeah.
else at this point because they really
Yeah.
don't have anything on Mall either. So it's like
Yeah, a lot of
they
there is stuff in between. It's like in between the
yeah,
system.
okay.
A lot of studios are kind of end up in that sort of limbo, you know what I mean? Where they don't
Yeah,
never end up
I
getting that like
wonder if
corporate check.
their like place on this is like a sign or something too though. I don't know, like they're crediting
Mhm.
being like maybe this is something that they're trying to like leap off of or like grow
Yeah.
off of or something. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that and 0G.
Yes, CRG, one of the veteran studios out there. But yeah, it is again Konyaku こんにゃくされた令嬢を拾った俺がいけないことを教え込む。美味しいものを食べさせておしゃれをさせ世界一幸せな教場にプロデュース are also known as I'm giving the disgraced noble lady I rescued a crash course in naughtiness. I'll spoil her with delicacies and style to make her the happiest woman in the world. Please do check
Yeah.
that out.
And I think I'll stick with Ikenaikyo.
Yeah, Ikenaikyo is the abbreviation.